you've worked with some very famous actors, producers. You worked with Ed Harris, Viggo Mortensen, Renee Zellweger, Dennis Quaid. You worked on Grey's Anatomy. I'm curious, shifting topics a little bit, about who are some of the, and this is almost like asking you who your favorite kid or your favorite pet is, but who are some of the people that you have worked with, some of the famous people that you've worked with that you really have a high opinion of? Who are some of your favorite actors or actresses that you've worked with?
I love Ed Harris. Ed is amazing. Ed's really about his craft. I learned a lot from Ed. I spent 6 months with him in San
I
Francisco.
love him as an actor, by the way. Just absolutely love him as an actor.
And I learned so much from him. He's such a humble man, but he's doing it for the right reasons. He's a real artist. And that's what I've learned. Like, get really good at your craft. Don't do this for the money. Do it because you love it and you care about it and you want to say something. And Ed taught me that on the long drives home between sets, where I drive him around, or sitting on a set where he's sitting there smoking his cigarette, telling me about how storytelling needs to be. It's about the moment to reality, Chapa, and this is how you look at a scene. And so I've learned a great deal. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Ed, not just as an actor, but as a human being. And his partner, who's a dear friend of mine, Robert Knott, who brought me on to, who introduced me to Ed, actually. And that's how I became involved with that project, who wrote Appaloosa and who grew up in Oklahoma in the oil field business. He was, he worked in that business for a long time, and he's an incredible talent. So I have a lot of respect for Ed. Look, I just worked with Dennis Quaid, loved Dennis, had an incredible experience working with him. He really leaned into this film and was a real trooper and really supported the kids. This film has a lot of Latino kids in it, and he just fell in love with the story and was really supportive of them, which I really appreciated. And it just a true professional, shows up on time every day, sits and eats with a crew. It's not, he doesn't go and sit in his trailer and eat, like sits and talks to the dude moving lights or moving a C-stand or whatever. Like, he's just a normal, good guy, who I think is an incredible talent and a hell of a human being. He just did he's one of the stars of a series called Lovecraft Country on HBO.
Yeah, no, that's the sci-fi deal that came out, right? Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft deal. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm looking forward to watching that.
He's incredible. He also did a movie called The Five Bloods, Spike Lee movie. Incredible. The
Vietnam movie. Yeah,
exactly. So he's actually grew up outside of Dallas. I have a lot of respect for him. He is starring as Murtis, which I'm super excited about, for the Murtis Dykeman project. He's an incredible guy. We're also working with Dee Reese, who directed Mudbound on that, and Gina Atwater, she writes on Westworld. She's staff there.
Nice.
She's an incredible talent as well. But those are some of the people that come to mind. There's people that I've met in this business that I have a lot of respect for that I haven't actually worked with, but that I've been fortunate to run in some of those A-list circles and meet some really great folks. And I would say you certainly have your fair share of a-holes out there. But you also have really good people. And I feel like some of the best people out there are just good, hardworking people. I think Tom Cruise is a really good example of that. I've spent some time with Tom. And I think the guy is he's one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. I mean, if you just go through his list of movies, it's incredible. And that guy, when you spend time with him and you watch him on a set and you see how gracious he is with everybody, the way Ed is, and how hard he works and how much he cares, then it all makes sense. It all adds up to you. You know?
It's not, in other words, it's not an accident that a guy like Tom Cruise is as successful as he is, because clearly, and I love hearing that, because one of the things I think we have a problem with right now is we tend to judge people not as individuals, but as groups. And there's this notion that everybody in Hollywood is a liberal asshole.
Right, of course.
But that doesn't mean he's not a great human being. That's like exactly you're talking about. You meet the guy in person. And so so to me, one of the solutions to a lot of our problems, and I see this, by the way, we haven't done this during the pandemic, but as part of my law business, I'll do focus groups. And what we intentionally bring in the most diverse group of people we can possibly bring in: Black, white, Hispanic, old, young, woman, man, you name it, different religions. And I'll tell you what I figured out: when they're sitting in a room together and they're discussing very important issues, almost nobody is fighting. People, when they're together in person, are generally nice to people. It's when we're looking at people on social media, or we're looking them up on the internet or whatever, and we don't actually know in person. We tend to judge people way more harshly than we would in person. But I love to hear that story about Tom Cruise, because I have read that before. I've read about how hard of a worker he is and how nice of a guy he is. And I'll bet you there's a lot of people in Hollywood. I'll bet you the majority of Hollywood is like that.
Yeah, listen, people come from all walks of life,
Yeah.
from all over the world out here. But you find for the most part, you certainly have your difficult creatives to work. I think a lot of creative people, it's not that they're difficult. It's just they look at things differently, and that's why they are who they are. And
exactly.
That's why they're so talented. And I think sometimes they're relentless in their vision and their point of view, but that's what it takes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
It takes that conviction and to stand behind your point of view, your voice, your story, and yourself.
Yeah.
You know, the best thing I learned out of here is, like, when no one else believes, you have to believe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because you will get shot down at every corner. I don't care if you're an actor, writer, director, you're going to get a hell of a lot of no's. I can tell you that right now. And get used to it. And that's the first thing I learned is, like, get used to the no's.
Yeah.
Find a way to turn all those into a yes. And you will eventually. It's like my old man always said, the harder you work, the better your luck gets.
For sure.
And,
no doubt about that. Yeah.
I think that applies to any business, and my business specifically, because it's a high stakes game, and it's a lot easier for someone to tell you than it is yes. The second they say yes and they got to start writing multi-million-dollar checks, their ass is on the line. Right?
Man, Hob,